All right, good evening. It's 6 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the City of Tucson Planning Commission meeting. In absence of both the chair and vice chair this evening, staff will call roll and then ask the commission to elect a temporary chair for this meeting only in accordance with the rules of procedure of the Planning Commission. So calling roll, Chair Kinney, Commissioner Lampo.
Present.
Commissioner Lane.
Present.
Commissioner McCancy.
Present.
Commissioner Ortiz-Pino.
Present.
Vice Chair Silva. Commissioner Small.
Present.
Commissioner Trumbull.
Present.
Commissioner Veach.
Present.
And Commissioner Willett.
Present.
Let the record reflect that a quorum is present. Next item is item number 2, assignment of temporary Planning Commission chair for the June 17th, 2026 meeting. Staff would entertain a motion to elect a temporary chair for the June 17th, 2026 Planning Commission meeting.
I would like to make a motion for Commissioner Lampo.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Where's my cheat sheet?
We have that. Okay, all in favor of electing Commissioner Lampo to be the temporary chair for the June 17th meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion carries, and at this time I will turn the meeting over to temporary chair Lampo.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the City of Tucson Planning Commission. My name is Thomas Lampo, and I'm the temporary chair of the Planning Commission. The responsibilities of this body are to advise the mayor and council and the Planning and Development Services Department on the adoption of long-range plans, policies, specific plans, and regulations that affect land use and development. I'd like to call for the next item, item number 3, approval of minutes and the legal action report from June 3rd, 2026. I would entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes. Do I hear a motion?
Chair Lampo, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes for June 3rd, 2026, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to move on to item 4, regulations for large-scale data centers. This is a Planning Commission action item. It is a meeting where commissioners have the opportunity to review changes to the proposed code amendment made following the Planning Commission public hearing and provide a recommendation to mayor and council. This is not the time for public comment on this item. Members of the public may address the commission during the call to the audience. Would staff please provide their presentation for item number 4, regulations for large-scale data centers?
Thank you, Chair Lampo. Yes, go ahead with the presentation on large-scale data centers as we are building on what we covered a couple of weeks ago. Just want to jump in with a little bit of background, high level, just to remind everyone that currently our zoning code treats smaller data centers as a storage use. However, large-scale data centers are not addressed in the UDC, Unified Development Code. As a result, we have no standards for their development. We do, however, have a zoning administrator determination that classifies large-scale data centers as a utility generating system use, and as such could be approved as a planned area development. However, again, with no standards, there's really not a lot that could be regulated with regard to that specific to the code. However, we are working on these proposed regulations to establish guardrails for the development of these large-scale data centers. A little bit more background just to go over our timeline to date. On August 6th of 2025, Mayor and Council requested that staff work to develop a Unified Development Code amendment. Following that, mayor and council adopted the large quantity water users ordinance in August of 2025. We came to the Planning Commission initially in September to go over the ask that we received from mayor and council and the process that we're going to follow going forward. From there, we formed a technical advisory committee that met from December through March to help guide the proposed standards. In February, late February and early March, we held a series of 4 community engagement meetings to receive public feedback on the proposed standards. Then we came back to the Planning Commission we came back to Mayor and Council on April 7th to brief on what we'd heard at the meetings and receive their feedback on the process to date. From there in May, we came to the Planning Commission for a second Planning Commission study session where we presented the proposed regulations, heard additional feedback, made changes, and came to the Planning Commission on June 3rd for the Planning Commission public hearing. During the public hearing, we had 12 members of the public comment. We'd received additional feedback from the Planning Commission. Planning Commission asked us to consider the feedback and come back with an updated code proposal, which is why we're here tonight. So this is, again, you've seen this slide before. This is just a real high-level proposal overview. We're going to get into the specific changes proposed following this, but the code proposal in general regulates noise, establishing noise limits at the property line, requiring sound walls and roof screening, establishes standards for generator use and battery backup. We've made some changes to both the noise and the generator use standards. Also, there are water supply certification requirements, must comply with the large water user ordinance, must demonstrate adequate water supply, and prohibiting use of potable water for cooling if not covered by the large quantity water user ordinance. We also have provisions for energy disclosure, requiring that applicants demonstrate adequate energy supply at time of application and disclosing energy use and mix upfront, so what percentage of renewables are proposed to be used. We also have some landscaping standards, which we've made some changes to that we'll discuss. These include the 40-foot landscaping borders, reduced parking requirements, 40% lot coverage, with the remainder as open space, and revegetation of disturbed land with native plants. So, as I mentioned just a couple of slides ago, we did hold a Planning Commission public hearing on June the 3rd. 12 members of the public spoke. One member spoke explicitly in support of the regulations. The other members spoke generally in opposition to at least some component of the regulations or the proposals, but it sort of varied. So it wasn't a full dichotomy of fully for or fully against, but generally we would classify as 11 against. After the public hearing was closed, there was Planning Commission discussion. Feedback was provided on legal considerations, water-related concerns, additional research on noise and health standards, recommended revisions and clarifications, as well to the code, which we're here to discuss this evening. At that time, the commission voted 10-0 to revisit this item within 45 days to allow staff to incorporate the feedback. And that is in accordance with the Planning Commission rules of procedure. So the specific items that we received feedback on and have addressed are some minor changes to the large-scale data center definition. We conducted a geospatial analysis of potential sites that would fall outside of the separation distances under the current code proposal. Made some reviewed Planning Commission review processes relative to a request to look into requiring proposals to go through the Planning Commission as part of a PAD or a PCD. We looked at the public notice requirements, the enhanced requirements, and potential notification of all residents versus just property owners, and we'll talk about what we came up with there. We did additional research on noise impacts and mitigation standards in terms of separation distances. We made some changes relative to the regulation of backup power. we made some proposed changes to the open space and lot coverage standards based on feedback that we've received during the public comment. And we also looked into decommissioning and potential ways to address that, and then minor corrections to spelling errors or typos within the code. So the first item that we looked at was the definition of a large-scale data center. We made a few minor tweaks. We proposed removing the term controlling interest. There was some concern that that might, create just a situation where you have multiple variable LLCs for essentially the same development. And instead, we're proposing and made a change to rely on the definition of the term site that already exists within the Unified Development Code. And the term site is defined in the UDC under section 11.4.20, and it reads the land area consisting of a portion of a lot, an entire lot, or contiguous lots, not including dedicated public property, designated for development as a single entity. So we believe that it would just be far more effective to rely on that definition that's already within the code. And we believe that that would kind of cover, if there would be kind of multiple entities developing the same single site. The next item that we looked at was the geospatial analysis, just to get an idea of potential sites where large-scale data centers could be developed. What we did was that we looked at all of the sites that are outside of the proposed separation distance of 2,640 feet from residential zoning, including RX1, RX2, MH1, MH2, R1, R2, and R3, and also are outside of the 1,000-foot separation distance from all commercial and office zoning. Based on that analysis, this doesn't mean that all these sites are available for development or anything like that, but these are all of the sites that are outside of those separation distances are shown on this map. They're all outlined in red. Generally, many to the Southlands, also around the air base, and some on the east side. So this just gives you, more of an idea of the potential sites that could meet these large separation distances. The next item that we looked into was the review process and the potential for requiring Planning Commission review of any proposed PAD or PCD for a large-scale data center. It's worth noting that the regulations as drafted would require a PAD or a PCD. That process, as it already exists across the board within the code for all PADs and PCDs, requires a zoning examiner public hearing and recommendation, a mayor and council public hearing and action. However, for all of these, the Planning Commission does not review unless a plan amendment is necessary. So if there is a plan amendment for a neighborhood or area plan that's in effect, that would trigger the plan amendment process, which has a Planning Commission review requirement. So we did look into that, and we have concerns that creating a different review requirements for only one specific land use would be legally challenging. It would get into treating one land use differently than all others, which raises equal protection concerns, and therefore we don't recommend that there be a specific change just for this one land use, but we did look into it. The next item that we looked into was public notice. Current UDC notice requirements that refer to property owners are based on state law and tied to that statute. We looked at potentially expanding notice requirements to include all residents and not just property owners. That is a larger issue that would apply, again, we believe citywide to notice if we were to make that change. However, What we did change was we removed the reference to property owners within the proposed code update and instead only referenced the public notice requirement within city code. So if we look at this down the road, we can make that change citywide potentially through a public review, process for that specific code amendment, looking at the implications of that citywide, and we would not need to come back and make a change to the large-scale data center regulations. They would simply be tied to that section as amended. And so that's something, again, that is definitely we heard about during this outreach process, and it is on our radar to take a closer look at. It's also worth noting that we are currently working with City IT to develop a opt-in electronic notification tool. It is outside of this code proposal, but the idea for this tool is that people could opt in to receive notification of land use change proposals through certain parts of the city that they could select, whether it be by ward, by neighborhood, or citywide, so that if they're interested in learning what's going on within any specific area, they could simply provide their email information and then be notified through an automated notification system of what's going on in that area that they've selected. So that is something that we are working on as well, just to enhance notification processes. So another item that was requested that we look at were noise impacts. And as we discussed following the public hearing, this is certainly challenging. We took another look at information relating specifically to infrasound from large wind turbines, which seem to be kind of the closest type of sound generating use, as well as large scale data centers. We really sought to look for peer-reviewed research or established standards that provide clear guidance for separation distances. We were looking for numbers, how far is far enough? And unfortunately, we really couldn't find anything out there that gave us that type of information. So that's certainly a challenge for establishing those, any specific standard, but we do feel confident in our enhanced separation distances that we have in the code to help protect against that. But one thing that we did make a change to within the draft code language was that we updated it to require an infrasound assessment as part of the noise study that would be required for any large-scale data center proposals. So we did call that out specifically as well, that's something that would need to be looked at when any sound assessment was being done as part of a proposal. We also received a lot of very helpful comments just prior to the public hearing on regulation of backup power. And so based on those comments, we made some changes to the proposed standards. These really consist of, number one, requiring that no routine or power generation could occur, and that it was the on-site power generation was limited to utility requests, outages, times of grid instability, or testing and maintenance. So if the utility were to request it, let's say it was a period of grid instability, or they had a reason where they needed the data center to go on to their backup power, we included that in there as a time, really to just work in more flexibility based on needs of the grid at a specific time. It's not intended to be something, though, that would be just regular operation. We also clarified that low-emitting generators are preferred. In many ways, these might be battery-based, but also that higher-emitting generators, which are fossil fuel generators, power generators, must meet Tier 4 emission standards in order to reduce the emissions as much as possible. We also added a provision that a data center must include at least 2 hours of battery backup, and that the battery systems must be the first line response during periods of grid instability before you powered up the fossil fuel generators. We also, again, I talked about this in an earlier bullet, but must be able to disconnect load from the grid upon utility request, again, during periods of great grid stress or instability, and clarifying that non-emergency maintenance was limited to weekdays from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m., so during regular business hours. No, excuse me. Thank you. 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Thank you. We also, based on feedback that we received, made some changes to the open space standards, allowing additional separation from sensitive environmental areas. These may include natural areas, riparian corridors, or open space, which may warrant an additional separation distance of up to a half a mile or 2,640 feet. Specific application of this would be determined by the zoning administrator in consultation with other city staff through the environmental resource report review process. So really looking at that on a case-by-case basis where there are areas of particular sensitivity, this does give the authority to protect those. This is one other provision that we sent out earlier this week that has been added really since the initial materials were sent out, and this was based on a conversation with the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection. The proposed regulations, as we've discussed, establish a 40% lot coverage maximum. However, during that discussion, they really wanted to see an option for potential offsite mitigation of more sensitive areas at a 2-to-1 ratio. So if there's a possibility that they could increase the maximum lot coverage above 40% on a site, but then mitigate sensitive areas at a 2-to-1 ratio elsewhere, we believe that this might allow flexibility, again, on a case-by-case basis to protect areas of particular sensitivity that may not otherwise be protected. This would only be allowed through the PAD or PCD process on a case-by-case basis. But again, it would be another tool in the toolbox essentially to try to achieve some additional protection of really critical areas as a community benefit through the PAD or PCD process. So based on that, we did make some changes to section 4.9.11.d.7 within the proposed code language, and this is the language as it currently is proposed. So this has changed slightly even from what we initially sent out. But this reads that an environmental resource report is required. The ERR shall identify the most appropriate area for development. Lot coverage is limited to 40%, and the remaining land area shall be dedicated as natural open space and reserved in perpetuity. And then we added, unless an offsite mitigation plan with a minimum of 2-to-1 offset of land is approved through the PAD or PCD. And then we retain the language, salvaged native plants shall be permitted on the development area. Any disturbed area shall be revegetated with native plants. We also, again, addressed decommissioning and made the minor corrections. With decommissioning, as we previously discussed, the standards for decommissioning are generally beyond the scope of zoning. It really gets into more of an operational standard and something that we're not empowered through the enabling statute to regulate. However, that could be included or considered as a condition for a PAD or PCD approval for any potential project. That was something for the town of Marana that was added as a condition just as of for instance. But again, that would need to be considered on a case-by-case basis, but it is something that we are aware of as well. And so that brings us to the next slide, which is where we are in this process. As I talked earlier in the presentation, we've gone through Mayor and Council direction, TAC, community meetings, community feedback, Planning Commission review, Planning Commission public hearing. We have now come back for consideration of this as an action item with these updates that I just covered. And the next item is Mayor and Council public hearing and review. So based on that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission make a recommendation to Mayor and Council to adopt the Unified Development Code amendment for large-scale data centers as proposed. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I will now open this up for any questions from the commission of staff related to the information that was just presented to us. Any questions? And also, I can't see who's online very well. I see Commissioner Small. I see Commissioner McCancy, it looks like. Do we have any other commissioners online? Okay, all right.
So I have a quick question about something that I believe Commissioner McCancy brought up in our last meeting that I didn't see discussed in the presentation, which was that we've heard a lot about the negative impacts of data centers, and we've literally heard nothing about the other side of the coin. What are the economic benefits of a data center, and what are the things that, what are the potential benefits of a use like this?
There are certainly tax benefits associated with data centers, and also there is a potential for community benefits that could potentially be negotiated through a development agreement. A lot of times those could be addressed on a case-by-case basis. There's possibility for infrastructure improvements that could be negotiated, or any number of other items. But a lot of times those really get outside of the purview of zoning and would really need to be, again, negotiated and agreed upon on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. And the reason I bring this up is because it's really, when we're stressing a lot of these things, we're putting regulations on something that could potentially benefit the community in a way of tax base. I know there were economic development specialists who were involved in discussions early on. Do we have any numbers of what the potential tax benefit would have been, the tax base, property taxes would have been to the city if something of this size would have been allowed to happen? So just generalities.
Yeah, Commissioner Ortiz-Pino, I don't have those figures of projected tax revenue. As Carver mentioned, though, that is one of the benefits, certainly, is property tax revenue. I do know that in Pima County, they have, the Board of Supervisors did adopt a resolution or some sort of agreement on how to specifically direct some of the funding and some of the anticipated revenue from, actually, I think it was related to the land sale and some of the revenue from the sale of the land to Project Blue to some specific county priorities. So for example, workforce development and things like that. I don't have the details on that, but I do know they've been able to use some of those funds to advance county priorities.
Would it be fair to say it's a pretty significant annual amount in property tax?
I think that's kind of speculation that we don't have that data in front of us. We have looked at data from, Loudoun County and some other places. The figures they report is that, yes, the property tax benefit exceeds what they estimate as the cost of providing service to those data centers. So a lot of the numbers that are out there do see it as a net benefit that has gone to the county to support some of the schools, and I think in their case, some daycare and other initiatives.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, Commissioner Lane.
So those benefits are left open for us to negotiate on a case-by-case basis if there's ever a proposal?
Like Carver stated, that would be like a development agreement on a case-by-case basis in any specific proposal. And so as this zoning approval has been proposed, they are very site-specific approvals that often are accompanied by development agreements that are a separate agreement that are also agreed to by mayor and council. Only mayor and council can approve development agreements in the
So
city of Tucson.
the example that you used in Loudoun County, though, that was a development agreement that happened at proposal time, the taxation that they're getting?
I'm not positive. I get the feeling that no, actually, previously, they were not site-by-site approvals. I think they're moving in that direction now, but those have been permitted as of right in Loudoun County. So that's just been generating property tax income.
Okay. I have a couple of other questions. Can you clarify? I'm sorry, I'm feeling confused about the last thing you guys were talking about, decommissioning. Does that mean decommissioning, like taking the data center offline, or does that mean what happens to the site and the building after it's, like if they leave?
Generally, what we mean is what happens to the site, the building, all of the computer equipment, all of the wiring that is within the data center, all of that e-waste would need to be disposed of. And so obviously there could be concerns about the environmental impacts of that. And so decommissioning would look at ensuring that that was done in a responsible way.
Okay, and are you saying that we don't have control over dictating any of that process in the zoning code?
That's correct. Yes, that would get beyond the actual use of the land, but through a PAD or a PCD, that could be established as a condition of that zoning approval. And once it's entered in as a condition, it is a legally binding component of that approval. So it's really just looking at the mechanism for requiring that decommissioning be addressed through a condition versus a standard that was integrated into the code that we just don't have the authority to place through that mechanism.
Okay, so during that PAD or PCD process, is there some kind of checklist that they would go through that this would come up again for sure? Or is this sort of a floater that somebody has to remember to bring up?
That's a really good point. I think these PADs and PCDs get addressed on a case-by-case basis, but I know that staff would be looking at decommissioning as one of the components of data centers, just understanding the implications of such a large facility with so much electronic equipment within it.
And then I had a couple of questions related to some of the public comments that we received today. And I think maybe this is, I guess I'm asking for my colleagues' opinions if they read it, but there was a letter from Tucson Pima Historical Commission. Their first bullet point says that they anticipate that the industry will attempt to evade regulation by building more smaller facilities. And they're recommending a definition of 20,000 square feet and 15 megawatts instead. I think that's probably a very real possibility that they would break up the large scale into a bunch of smaller projects. So I am curious if anybody else has opinions on changing those numbers.
Sure.
With regards to that question there that Commissioner Lane just posed, Carver, I believe you mentioned a moment ago that, and I lost my train of thought. Give me 1 second.
I want to add something while you think about that. I actually did some research into zoning codes across the state just to see if I could find any decommissioning, anything. And I found several actually, Mesa, Buckeye, and it's mostly related to battery energy storage systems. But I think that's similar enough to data centers that we could include something in our zoning code. And so very specifically, if you look at Mesa's zoning code, section 1131, 37, battery energy storage systems, purpose to provide specific requirements for siting, construction, operation, and decommissioning of battery energy storage systems.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was not the response to your question, but I did remember that. But piggybacking off of that, the town of Marana also does the exact same things with regards to battery energy storage. And I have it pulled up right here, and it's the exact same language. And it says the developer of a solar energy system or energy storage facility must provide the town with a decommissioning plan at the time of development.
That's right. And the city of Eloy, I believe Gilbert, I believe Chandler as well, and then several counties, but those are different, state guiding statutes. So those don't really matter for this, but I did find several municipal codes that required decommissioning.
And then with regards to Commissioner Lane's perspective of, reducing the size and, data center developers circumventing code, et cetera. Now, Carver, doesn't the site, the controlling interest and the definition we've changed with regards to site still control that endeavor? So even if you broke up multiple buildings that were smaller than the site would collectively be looked at as a whole. And if you got over the 25,000 square foot, you are a large scale data center. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's my interpretation as well. If you start to cobble together those multiple smaller centers, it would meet the definition of site within the code and therefore be subject to the regulations once it crosses the proposed threshold.
Okay.
And wouldn't the technical term be subterfuge if you are developing several small centers with the intent of producing above 50 megawatts, that doing so is subterfuge to this code? So maybe adding some language about that would make sense.
I like subterfuge as a word and
Yeah, it's kind of a complicated zoning word, though. If I may, just on a couple things, I was noticing in just some code things, we might want to specify which section of the code, as we would talk to about our ERRs, reference the rezoning administrative manual, section as opposed to an ERZ, just clarity situation. And then we might also want to update the ERR section. So section in the administrative manual 203.5.0 environmental resource report, under the applicability, add that a large scale data center is required to do just so that it's very clear and multiple perspectives. I do appreciate the analysis you all as staff has done on changing the process. I am not supportive of changing a public process by any means for one user. I think we can get ourselves, legally in trouble maybe. And I think it's with the process we've created, albeit I'm not agreeing on it either. But I think the zoning procedures that currently exist today make sense. Now, I want to offer some things to Commissioner Lane for the rest of the commission to discuss as to what we might be able to do to talk about additional design reviews, because unfortunately, it's not going to come through this body just by way of the code. However, there is a couple other ways that we can think about this. And one comes, with a pad. A lot of pads are crafted in such a way that they have a design review committee inherent to them. And that often consists of a neighborhood representative, a representative from the ward, the developer, and obviously the developer writing the pad gets to kind of pick and choose who's on that. But that's typical in a pad process, is to write in or require that a design review committee be inserted. And so one of the provisions in the administrative manual that articulates what a pad requirement is, one of those line items says any other item as determined by the Planning and Development Services Director. So that could very well be determined at a pre-application meeting that a requirement of the pad is that they establish a design review committee within it. So that's one mechanism that's already baked in. Alternatively, there are a number of other utility uses within the community and use-specific standards associated with them that require an additional review. And I'm talking about, I'm really familiar with wells, substations, et cetera. And there is a provision that requires that the buildings, the landscaping, everything be reviewed by the design review board. So while not this body here, another city-appointed body of people reviewing it. And so I think if there is a desire to include additional review bodies, that might be something we consider in that fashion, as opposed to changing an entire zoning process just for one user there. So, and I'll leave it there for now for discussion.
The design committee that is, you said it's selected by the developer, and that's common for all pads, or that's?
So as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but when a pad is created, obviously as the person, writing the pad, you get to create that. But oftentimes when there is a public process associated with it, you're working with the council folks. It's a negotiation that often occurs. And I've seen it worked on a number of pads, and that comes up in controversial projects, is the recommendation that there is subsequent meetings as development occurs on it. Corn, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, commissioners, the most PADs do include a design review committee that has different composition depending on the planned area development, but does usually include, for example, a representative of a nearby neighborhood association. Usually a range of different community stakeholders are included on a design review committee.
I wanted to, Commissioner McCancy, I saw that you had your hand up. It's hard for me to tell at this angle. Did you still have a question?
It was more of a comment to Chris's comment or question about the economic benefits. I think we have a new economic development office or officer or something in the mayor and council purview, and it would be good, I think, in general, to have more discussion about those, generally at these kinds of meetings. But I do recognize that there's only so much you can do in the zoning code, and I think the work that's been done has actually been pretty terrific. So that's my comment.
Thanks. And Commissioner Small.
Good evening, everybody. Again, congratulations to the staff for turning this all around in a couple of weeks and incorporating all this extra information. That's it's a good job, and I know you've all worked hard on it. Just a couple of clarification questions for me. I'll put my hand down. In the presentation, and I'm kind of working with my iPad here, so excuse me if I'm water under the proposal overview, water supply certification, it says must comply with large quantity water user ordinance if Tucson water customer. So what property owner within the boundaries of the city of Tucson would not be a Tucson water customer, especially at this quantity?
Commissioner Small, there would be no uses within the city of Tucson that would not be a Tucson water customer. So any entity, data center, or other business within the city would be required to go through Tucson Water. So it's really just a matter of if they meet that threshold for the large quantity water user ordinance, which the Tucson Water Director, Mr. Kamik, provided an overview of that at the last meeting and public hearing. So if a proposed data center did not hit that threshold for large quantity water use, then the requirements in the code would kick in, which prohibit the use of potable water for cooling. So there's a couple aspects of the proposed regulations on water.
Okay, thank you. The geospatial analysis, which I think is very helpful, and I think we've been kind of tossing that around the last couple of meetings that we've had, is could we see that? And you guys have pulled that together, and I think that's quite helpful. And just because I don't think I see a city of Tucson boundary, I'm assuming that all these parcels indicated, particularly the ones that are available for data center usage, this is all within the city of Tucson boundary. What's shown here on this graphic?
Yes, that's correct. All of the parcels shown on the graphic are within the incorporated limits of the city.
Okay. I don't know whether you need to redraw this or add to this graphic, but in my opinion, it might be helpful to have dashed line or something indicating the city of Tucson actual boundaries.
Certainly, duly noted.
And then the last one, let me see if I can get to it. It was the draft red line code under 3 sound. Where did that go? It says proposed generators, D1, 3D1. Proposed generators must be for backup only with a preference for low emitting. And it's that word preference that makes me think, well, we're not really saying that they have to have low emitting. We're just preferring that they do. And then, in reality, given that range where whether a developer might go.
Certainly, we've looked at that, and given the uniqueness of each proposed or potentially proposed large-scale data center, we felt like there needed to be some flexibility within the code for individual solutions. And so we caveated that with the term preference. I don't know if it makes sense to specifically require that, since each proposal might be different.
Yeah, Commissioner Small, I think that would be kind of one component that would also be part of that energy disclosure. So we'd be looking at the proposed energy use, mix of energy sources, and proposed makeup of those backup generators as part of the review, site-by-site review of the proposed PAD.
So there's other things that could shoehorn them into where we want them to go without allowing them a preference. Okay. And my last comment is just I was encouraged to see the letter that Carver sent out this afternoon from the Coalition of Sonoran Desert Preservation, and their sort of I interpret it as being a kind of a sign off of all the changes that you've all done, and I thought that was encouraging. That's all for me for now.
I have a follow-up question to that. What is infrared sound? Infrared sound?
Infrasound is a subaudible, thank you, that's the word I'm looking for, subaudible sound that is not necessarily able to be heard by the human ear, but it does travel and impacts through vibration areas around the generator. There's some research which actually states that infrasound may get concentrated around buildings. It sort of harmonizes around those buildings and could actually increase in those cases. And there's some research that has expressed concerns about the health impacts of infrasound on people's sleep, quality of sleep, or other biological functions. There's a lot of different conflicting research out there, but those concerns are certainly raised. And so we felt based on that it was important that that be looked at and considered through any analysis.
Just let me add a little bit from the legal perspective. If we include infrasound now, if there comes a study later that tells us what those risks are, it's in the code and we have something to work from. If it's not there, we're trying to shoehorn it in later.
That actually makes sense, and I don't. That sounds good. I guess my question is, so let's hypothetically say that we're getting several applications. We now have several studies that are showing results in these specific areas, so localized results. What if the results show that there are less than half-mile impacts, or the impacts are less than what we would have here? And I guess I'm kind of going back to setbacks here, but if impacts are less than what we have there, what remedies would an applicant have?
So certainly we are looking at sound impacts as part of the reasoning for the proposed separation distances, but we're also looking at heat impacts. And we're seeing a lot more information on heat impacts that really do coalesce with the proposed enhanced separation distances. And so it's not simply based on sound impacts, but we do feel confident based on heat that we would still be mitigating that. So we would not anticipate any reduction. If there were a reduction, needed to be a reduction, if this gets adopted with that half-mile setback, it would require a change to the code, which would require action from mayor and council.
Okay. I guess, obviously you're comfortable with the half-mile, and you mentioned heat, but it wasn't in the presentation specifically. We've not received any information specific to that. So if you could expand on that, what are those impacts and how?
So we are seeing research that states that generally 5 to 7 degrees Celsius around large-scale data centers could be, heat could increase around those data centers. And so if you're looking at somebody's air conditioning bill when suddenly the temperature outside has gone up by 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and they're day in and day out trying to cool that, as well as the quality of life impacts. Those are the concerns that we're seeing. There's been fairly recently a large number of, not a large number, but several studies that have come out that have actually mapped the heat impacts. One of the challenges, though, that it does have a lot to do with prevailing winds. So the heat impacts one day may not be the same on the next day, which I believe makes a case for the expanded separation distances. One of the things that we looked at was also trying to model heat impacts prior to development of any proposed data center. And that's where we also ran into a challenge. There's just not a lot of regularly, conventionally accepted modeling available at this time where they could, say, well, we believe that it's only going to impact 1,000 feet to the north, for instance. So that just doesn't exist in a peer-reviewed, generally accepted way at this time. So I think that also makes the case for the expanded separation distances.
Commissioner Veach?
Yeah, I'll just say as a comment on this discussion, in the public comments that we received this time around on page 42 and 55, there's some pretty robust studies on data heat island effects that were shared with us that you may want to consider looking at.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Have we done any research about a qualified pool of people or consultants that can do infrared sound studies?
Good question.
Or sorry, infrasound. Infrared sound. I like that better. You can see it and feel it. No, have we looked, like, I'm serious about this because I from experience, it is incredibly hard to find acoustical engineers, period. And if we're adding things, I mean, a lot of this feels, and I'm just going to say it, that we are trying to create regulations that we're not going to make it possible here. And, however we want to decide on that, that's fine. But I want to make sure that whatever we are agreeing to, in the event that there is an applicant that can meet all of these requirements, that we aren't putting them in a situation that it is physically impossible without spending buku bucks beyond, et cetera. I think you get my point here.
I will say that, infrasound is one of the main arguments against windmills. So wind turbines, that's been extensively studied. Is that something we could lean on?
I think that makes the case that an acoustical engineer who has experience working with wind turbines where infrasound is an issue may be the type of individual who would be best qualified to do an assessment as required by the code. I also believe as data centers continue to be proposed elsewhere that skill set might become more and more common.
Okay. Any other discussion? Yes, Commissioner Ortiz-Pino.
Was there anything in the geospatial analysis that surprised you?
There were one or two very tiny parcels that were outside or that are outside of the separation distances on the east side that were kind of anomalies, but that was it. I think in general, those were the sites that we thought were most likely to be candidates for development potentially.
So something feels a little bit icky to me, which is that we had a technical advisory committee who met 4 times, I believe, and it was a very well-rounded committee, had members from both sides of this conversation. All of those membership had an opportunity to comment on this and to put forth their opinions and ideas, and it created the code that we had as a baseline. Sometime between our last hearing, the public hearing, and when it closed, and what we see today, we see that the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection, who was a member of the committee, had a conversation with Planning Development Services, and then the code changes. The proposed code changes rather considerably. And so I'm wondering, does anybody else feel icky about that?
Heard.
I mean, Commissioner Ortiz-Pino, we did have a conversation with them because that was a comment that came in on the record, and Planning Commission in the motion at the last meeting specifically directed staff to incorporate comments from that entity. So we did coordinate with them to understand their comments better. We also reached out and communicated with another commenter on the record who the Planning Commission specifically mentioned in their motion, which the comments from Adria Brooks. So we did consult with those experts, if you will, because we received the direction to incorporate those comments. And we want to make sure that we understood their comments. We also shared some of our perspectives in areas that we, might not be able to accommodate their input and feedback, and just we're able to have a dialogue with them.
So one of the additions, let's see, 311D, other such usage as natural areas, riparian corridors, and open spaces may warrant a separation distance of up to a ½ mile, as determined by the administrator in consultation with city, on review of the environmental resource report. That seems really squishy to me. There's nothing really firm in a zoning regulation about that. There's a lot up for interpretation to that. So I'm wondering, what is it about that would come from that report that would say, okay, this warrants a ½ mile, or could it warrant a quarter mile or less? Or because the other thing that I wanted to bring up was that the area in which the geospatial analysis identified as potential parcels is all within the Lee Moore Wash Study area and is an incredibly regulated riparian area. And so within that, are we further limiting that? And was there any further geospatial analysis done to look at how much more you are limiting the potential for a parcel?
Commissioner Ortiz-Pino, we didn't do any further analysis beyond what was provided to the Planning Commission, so we haven't looked at that. But you're right, the Lee Moore Wash Study would be one of those inputs that could be evaluated and part of the environmental resource reports. That would be one of the baseline analyses that could be included and referred to in environmental resource report. But that report is meant to be very site specific and really inventory what are the environmental assets of this site, what is most critical for protection, what are the more suitable areas for development, and look at the surrounding area to look at, are there some, critical habitat areas nearby that do warrant that type of setback. But I think you're right that is open-ended, where again, I think we're looking at that PAD process, which is a public review process with lots of opportunity for public input and comment to define really what warrants that type of separation. And we would be looking at very clearly defined natural resources for that separation.
What kind of natural resources are we talking about?
So yeah, what's defined here is riparian corridors or open space. So really riparian areas, washes, things like that, which mostly have been identified and named, but we're just looking, are there natural resources that do warrant that type of separation? Certainly any sort of, I think already identified open space, it was maybe already under conservation easement, something like that would also be considered.
So I recently completed a project in this very specific area, the corridor between Country Club, Houghton, from Oldvale Connection all the way down to basically Santa Rita Road. And there's no designated critical habitat in this area, but there are very significant regulated riparian areas. And as you mentioned, they're all very well identified. When we look at identifying these riparian areas and the recommendations of the Lee Moore Wash Study, which is generally speaking, leaving the alternative, the chosen alternatives were to leave the the natural wash confluences, leaving it as natural as possible because that's what is the best thing for managing floodplain use. When we take that and then we say, okay, well now you have to buffer that a quarter mile. What does that do to the potential sites? And everything that we've done to this code seems that we're limiting further and further and pointing out this specific use, we don't want it. And I feel like there's a significant portion of the population who would agree with that, but it's also a pretty small population compared to the overall. And I just feel like we're pointing out one specific use and I don't know, I think I'm not a lawyer here. We have one, but it seems iffy.
I think it's a new, I mean, it's a use that we're trying to fit and exist a completely new thing that we're seeing in our country into an existing zoning code and be responsible about the way we're regulating it and weighing what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do, and mitigating any potential risk that we as the city might have by, say, doing something like a moratorium. I mean, I understood the last time when I asked about moratorium that proposing something like that actually leaves us open for some potential bad guys to come and sue us.
Interim Chair Tom Lampo, Member Lane. A moratorium has a place in the state statutory structure, and there's a way to do it. And it's set up in such a way that it actually appears like somehow it's a great way to stop something. But if you read through it, it sets a lot of traps for local jurisdictions and provides a lot of opportunity to the development community. If you read through it, it provides a lot of appeals processes, and it sets up government for a lot of pitfalls. So a lot of attorneys aren't going to be in favor of a moratorium. And then I always use the term, is the juice worth the squeeze? We go through all of that effort. We adopt a moratorium and it's perfect and it's good for 120 days and then we have to do it again.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm a big believer that we need a regional approach to this and pretty much the public outcry that we've seen happen. I'm preaching my opinion here, but I don't think we're going to be seeing anybody proposing another data center here for quite some time. So I don't actually believe this code is going to be used. It feels, I think I'm trying to make sure that I get to an understanding that we write something, there's something in the code book that we can rely on, but it's really going to be the PAD process that gives us the capability to negotiate something that works like a partnership between our community and a data center. So, I mean, we can be extremely restrictive or barely restrictive right now, but at the end of the day, we have to have a specific project to discuss and talk about before we can understand all the implications of it. So my own personal comfort level in this conversation is, do we have the opportunity to address all the problems that a actual proposed project will bring to the community? Because right now it's kind of a bit, I feel like we're just throwing darts at the moment, trying to put something in place that will be not, that won't at least corner us as the city of Tucson into a weird place. So
I guess my position is I would agree. We're not going to see very many applications after this, and I think that's by design.
Probably. Well, we've been exploited a couple times by now, so.
Okay, any additional comments?
I have one more question, actually.
Sure.
Sorry, this is, I'm not sure I understand. There was a public comment that came in pretty late today, and it talks about asking whether the commission has set any land use thresholds that account for the cumulative impact on civilian area from build outs on local military land, and goes on to talk about Davis-Monthan and surpassing thresholds. And then there's a question about the Geneva Convention, and I don't know what this means personally, but I'm curious if you have read it, if you understand it, if we need to take a closer look at I guess from what I'm taking away, there's some relationship between our civilian land and the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, and I'm not sure how to think about this question.
Commissioner Lane, so Davis-Monthan is federal land and is not subject to City of Tucson zoning. That being said, in terms of cumulative impact of multiple data centers, whether it's on land in city jurisdiction or not, that is something that, again, can be addressed when we're looking at a pad and looking at, what is the proximity to other uses that generate heat, that generate noise, and will this individual facility, have more of a cumulative impact based on that proximity? But just to say, Davis-Monthan, there has been discussion about potential for a data center there that is outside the city of Tucson jurisdiction. Our zoning would not come into play.
So again, bringing up the importance of having a regional strategy would be preferable to any of this. Okay, so it does say at the end, I'm just going to read verbatim. Are you creating local planning regulations that mirror international conventions in restricting the development of legitimate military targets in civilian areas? I don't know what this means. Are we, maybe this is one of those comments. I'm not sure.
Let me help try to answer part of this, Member Lane. One of the biggest problems we have, especially when it comes to general planning, is there's a humongous section in the statute that says, and I'm going to paraphrase the heck out of it, thou shalt not do anything to make any problems with a military base. And that's a lot fewer words that are actually in the statute, but we are basically outside of the realm of that. It sounds like what the commenter is trying to get us to do is deal with that issue. And I think Corin hit it on the head. Is the best thing we can do is have a PAD process that we go through where we can consider those effects on the neighboring properties without trying to regulate that federal property, and do what we can at that time, because the federal government will give us all kinds of things and none of them will be, yes, we'll follow your code.
Gotcha.
If they're very nice, they might let us see the plans, but they don't care. They're going to build it. Okay, any additional comments, questions, concerns? And I want to point out one thing as well. So at the completion of our last, so when we continued this item, we closed the public comment portion, correct? Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Okay, so with the completion of the discussion, I'm going to open this up for a motion to vote to make recommendation to mayor and council on regulations for large-scale data centers. May I have a motion for a vote on a recommendation to mayor and council on the proposed regulations for large-scale data centers?
I'll make a motion to approve the mayor and council's, or to approve a recommendation to send this to the mayor and council.
Thank you, Commissioner McCancy. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
I think this is probably going to require a roll call vote then.
Commissioner Lampo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lane,
Aye.
Commissioner McCancy,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortiz-Pino,
Nay.
Commissioner Small,
Aye.
Commissioner Trumbull,
Aye.
Commissioner Veach,
Aye.
and Commissioner Willett.
Nay.
We have 2 against and 6 in favor.
So motion passes.
Interim Chair Lampo, the motion passes, however, it does not a recommendation to mayor and council, as a formal recommendation from planning commission requires 7 affirmative votes. We will reflect the full record to mayor and council of the discussion and the vote of the planning commission.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay. So moving on to item number 5, PDSD staff announcements. Would staff please provide any PDSD updates to the commission?
No updates. We just have some future items on the next agenda item.
Okay. Item number 6, future agenda items. Would staff please provide the commission with a preview of the upcoming agenda items?
Yes, so there will be a reprieve in July, we believe, so you guys can enjoy a little summer break. We anticipate the next Planning Commission meeting in August to hold a study session on the Code Tucson package, which is our code package, which will include a number of different amendments to the Unified Development Code, and we'll also review the Planning Commission rules of procedure at that time.
Okay, great. So item number 7, moving right along, call to the audience. At this time, I would like to offer the public an opportunity to speak on any subject that is not listed on the current agenda as a public hearing. If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand and let us know that you'd like to speak. Or if you're virtual, please raise your hand. Do we have, looks like we do. Okay. Not seeing any hands raised virtually, so we do have one speaker in person, Andy Faulkner Harrison. Thank you. And I would like to point out, when this goes in front of mayor and council, you'll be given another chance to speak as well. Thank you. Sure.
This is my first time being on these, so I'm just still trying to figure out how it works, you know? So I guess the first thing.
But really quick, could you just state your name for the record?
Sure, Amir Qureshi. So first name is Aamir, last name is Quraishy.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So I guess the first thing regarding audio engineers, just go down to the U of A. We have like the Center for Acoustic Sounds. It's on the 5th floor of Grant Challenges. It's 2 floors above me. A lot of them are doing a lot of really interesting research with regards to basically using different types of acoustic hardware development and theory. Just get a couple of them, probably go to someone like people working on similar projects at the U of A and collaborations like I think it's called the Alice projects that's working on optoelectric acoustics for like satellites. That should probably be the easiest plan forward. 2, you guys were talking about earlier, basically figuring out how to find that middle line. What about a lot of it is adaptability? Because there's a lot of work being done in the research for how to provision a lot of things like data models, et cetera, and also systems with intelligent sensing to be able to like monitor a lot of how those different data centers can actually distribute technology. Is there any plans forward to try to basically require these data centers to have a budget set aside for developing a lot more of those green ecological technologies? And the other thing that I wanted to push on is would there be, and I've written those before when I was at a previous hearing to TAC about looking for fair hiring practices. 1, making sure that local Tucson people are able to get the first jobs. 2, making sure there could be training positions available at PIMA and other sort of local systems so that, you know, a lot of Tucson people can get trades in these data centers. And 3, just, you know, reinvesting back into the U of A into more affordable data center technologies.
Sure. Well, thanks for your comments. I would suggest submitting a written comment, and also if you wouldn't mind coming back when this goes in front of mayor and council, which would be in, what, do we have an idea of when that would be?
We'll need to consider the date for the mayor and council public hearing, but that will be noticed to the public through a variety of mechanisms, including email if you're on the Planning and Development Services email list.
Yeah, so I would keep an eye out when it comes back. Please come back and read your comments into the record then.
Oh, I already submitted my comments. This was like 2 or 3 data center hearings ago. I think it was the one at, it was that high school thing. It was, and I sent it to Nick, who was on the TAC committee.
Mr. Chair, we are in the middle of a very touchy public records and open meeting issue.
Yeah, and so when we open to the audience, you're not actually allowed to speak about any item that's on the current agenda.
Oh, I didn't know if it was on the current agenda or not.
They could speak on this one. The problem is you can't get into a deliberation with him from the dais or it could become another issue. So it's.
Oh, I believe we received your comments and thank you for your time. And again, please come back, Mayor and Council, and let your comments be known then.
Okay, yeah, I don't know how this works, so I'm just filtering.
That's okay. Thanks.
And just to clarify, interim chair, members of the public can speak on any item that is not on the agenda for public hearing. So they are welcome to comment on this item.
Well, thank you.
It's just not considered part of the public hearing.
Okay, anyone, I do see one hand raised. I cannot see your name though.
Hi, this is Vivek Bharathan. I'm trying to phrase this as a public comment. I'm very confused about what just happened in terms of the 6 vote versus 7 vote threshold, and I'm hoping that Commissioner might ask staff to clarify for the public what the difference there was and what the consequences are of not having that 7 vote threshold. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a pretty easy one to answer. We have a requirement, but did you want to? We have a requirement for a certain threshold for votes for a quorum. We're required to have 7 votes to send a recommendation to Mayor and Council, 7 positive votes. So we didn't actually make that. So we sent the item to Mayor and Council essentially as is. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. No other, anyone else in the audience? Okay, with that, I'll close the call to the audience. Moving on to item number 8, a call to adjourn. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thanks.
Aye.
Oh, do we have to call? Do we have to do it? Let's do a roll call. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Lampo, for stepping up as chair for this meeting. We really appreciate it. And thank you all, as always, for your time on the commission.